So where in the world do we allow for crazy ideas to come about? Because if you're always trying to protect what you have, whether you're a large company or a government, then you're stuck with incremental progress. But if you really want breakthroughs, then you need to be thinking in outlandish ways.
Do you ever consider the possibility that technology is a life form in and of itself? Do you ever consider the possibility that we are somehow interlocked in some symbiotic relationship to we are the worker bees creating this new life form?
We're going to see a huge change in the cost. And again, it's going to come pretty fast, by 10 years, I think.
And a kid in Africa today with a smartphone has access to more information than the President of the United States did 15 years ago.
That the cell phone in one's pocket today, the average smartphone, is 1 million times cheaper. 1 million times smaller.
Welcome to the Futurology Podcast, episode 13. My name is Jason, aka Blinker Goes Left, and with me, as always, is Alex.
Hello.
You guys know him by SpeakMouthWords.
Yep, that's me, SpeakMouthWords. This week, 3 months, we have with us Ion Tom, a fellow moderator on the Futurology subreddit. Hi, you just did something interesting. Tell us about that and yourself.
Sure. Thank you for the introduction. My name in real life is Tom Reekin. I live in Seattle. We recently hosted the Seattle Futurist Conference, or we call ourselves the Seattle Futurist Society. Mm-hmm. We had a gathering of sorts at. We were hosted. This guy found us, I think, through the Reddit, and then we made a meetup page. And we ended up getting a venue at the City University of Seattle, which is, they're sort of like a international, they're sort of a technical and vocational college, and they have like master's programs and such. I came from the University of Washington, which is more it's the state college here.
Sure.
And we had a speaker from UW come and give a lecture on, he actually works in the aeronautics engineering part of UW, but he works on plasma, and he's doing nuclear fusion design. Mm-hmm. And he gave a talk on the spheromac configuration of nuclear fusion, which is, it's sort of based on what the tokamak thing, like they're doing in France, the ITER experiment, except it's their design is much smaller because it's instead of using a toroidal configuration, it's spherical, and it's it was a very in-depth talk about sort of what the binding energy, like what sort of goes into designing a reactor, and then it was kind of a cost-effective breakdown between his design, the ITER design, fission, coal. What is the energy efficiency for unit of fuel? It was really in depth, and it was pretty cool.
I have a question. Did he talk about the recent where they finally one of the big roadblocks was that we haven't been able to get more energy out than we've put in, right? And recently there was a breakthrough in that. Did he talk about that at all?
There's the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory has a laser. Instead of a sort of like most plasma designs have an electromagnetic trap, and then it's a containment wall that all the fusion takes place within. I think that announcement that just came out was the Livermore lab. They're doing a different type of fusion where it's laser induced. I don't know what sort of like traps they're using, but it's at a smaller scale. So it's, I think, than some of these. It might have been a net positive, but it wasn't at an industry large scale, and you sort of have to have the magnetic containment and like a a larger area of plasma to I think have the type of, I mean, don't quote me on this. I only have the undergraduate degree, and I never really did much in terms of like atomic physics.
Right.
I mean,
the details.
I did astronomy. I know that, you know, if you run fusion long enough, you'll enrich a galaxy and the metallicity goes up. But
did he say what the current roadblocks are for fusion?
Well, they're actually, his design uses it's actually a warmer type of superconductor. It goes up to 77 Kelvin, so you can use liquid nitrogen to cool it instead of liquid helium, which most superconductors have to be operated at that, which is just a few degrees above standard fusion temperatures, or I mean above sub-zero. And so I think the big breakthrough that their group is sort of depending on is, I mean, they already have this type of warmer superconductor, but they don't have it to the scale required yet to build it at like an industrial scale, I think. So that, but I mean, there's also there's a lot of technical points, and I forget what, I don't think it was a binding energy. I think it was some sort of I have to look at my notes, but a bifurcation. There's like a bifurcation energy in the cross section of they sort of use this term called a cross section to determine like how much, like every particle has an uncertainty, and there's like an area mapped to it based on how, you know, what it's a cross sectional area, and if you can get two cross sectional areas of two atoms to coincide in the same place, then you get fusion to take place. And so there's something called a bifurcation energy that he says was sort of like the holy grail for plasma fusion. But anyway, it was a cool talk. But I mean, let me digress and kind of go over like the group in general. We also talked about we had the speaker Eric Fretheim, who's works at the City University of Seattle, and his talk was more on information security. So he was doing information security and the theory of war applied to cyber war. And so he kind of went over all these exercises that he's done before in the classes that he teaches, where different groups of students would behave as different nations. Like one group would be North Korea, the other would be Japan, and then they would try to like spread disinformation between each other and like try to hack into each other's systems. And they had like a referee, like white team, and they had sort of like these fake media outlets, or they're real media. They're like subsumed real media outlets, but you could submit fake news and sort of try to like deter and use disinformation against your enemies. And so we sort of had we had this really interesting after he gave his talk, we kind of had this really cool interactive component, like where we had all the groups sit together, and we had like 3 different groups, and we sort of brainstormed and like had a think tank where we try to come up with the best case, worst case, and expected case scenarios. And it was really interesting to see that the best cases, almost all of our best case scenarios happen around 20 years to 30 years in the future. And it was, global peace and harmony through like a balance between information being like having security, and like organized crime is detected and doesn't get to use the same security advantages that an established state might.
Yeah.
And then versus like the worst case scenario, which could happen tomorrow, which would be like disinformation leads to global conflict or nuclear weapons deployed or something, or then there was the other like tangent worst case scenario, which was Skynet. But the strange part was that, I don't know if it was strange, but the interesting case was that all the expected scenarios were like 10 years in the future, and it was pretty much like, yeah, the status quo will just continue. So it was I wonder if that's true of other debates or other types of technologies, if people were to discuss those things. If that's sort of like the norm for people to be like, yeah, it'll be about the same as it is now 10 years from now, if that's the sort of prediction that most people generally make without even thinking about it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like that, I was thinking about this recently. You have these, if you have some defined endpoint, and I was thinking about this in terms of cyberpunk. I was thinking about how perhaps 35, 40 years down the line, there's this defined thing, and if you say that you have this point you're going to get to with, peace or whatever, but in the meantime, people are saying in 10 years' time it's going to be roughly the same. It's difficult to go through one and get to the other. Like you have to, it's getting to all these different points on the graph before you get to where you think it's going to be. So I've been thinking recently about flipping the whole question of predicting the future around on its head, and instead of going, well, if you look at current trends, where's it going to go? You take a defined point and you say, if the world is going to be like this, you have some examples. So let's say you take William Gibson's stuff from William Gibson's novels. He's a sci-fi writer. If you take the world that he creates 30, 40 years down the line, and you look at that, you have to ask yourself, what needs to occur for that to happen? And it's a different way of thinking about it. It's like being in the future and looking back and wondering what has happened to get to that point, rather than being in the present and looking forward and saying, well, where are things going to go? And it's quite interesting, I think.
Absolutely. One of the things we were trying to expand on too was we actually created a chart where one of the axes was near term, which is tomorrow. The other end of that axis was far term, which the furthest date we had was 2040, and then on the y-axis we had the top being optimistic and the bottom being pessimistic. And so I sort of wonder what other sort of like phase spaces you could map onto a chart to try and like plot these predictions, or if there's any type of chart where you could have if-then statements incorporated into, like you could have divergent points in your graph where like it's like a milestone, and if we reach, if we're able to develop, this tensile strength of a carbon nanotube, will we be able to have a space elevator by this date or that date?
Yeah, and it's like if Moore's law stops at one point, or if Moore's law stops at another point, that's a wildly different future 40 years down the line.
Right. And it's also funny that I mean, I'm an optimistic guy, and I always think that, in 100 years from now or 200 years, there won't be any war, and everyone's going to have what they want. We're going to have replicators. But recently I've been thinking that, we thrive a lot under conflict, and the world there's never been a day when the world was not in conflict. And what happens if that goes away? Are we going to continue to innovate as fast as we do now? Yeah,
it's weird to think
so,
about.
I mean, right, we did kind of bring up, one person asked in our conference, would absolute transparency create a world without conflict? And the answer was, well, not really, because transparency, it's very hard to distinguish disinformation from real information still, because it's just sort of like the amplifier. I forget what that effect is called, where where one person whispers into another person's ear and it gets changed.
Yeah,
that sort of effect happens a lot. In fact, it even happened on one of our talking points, which was the Muslims can't live on Mars thing. And I guess we can talk about that later. But it's just a case of where it's either the media or social networks, social media, like distorts the message of something, and that sort of mutates. I think transparency doesn't completely dispel of that. It might dispel of like, if Google had like live satellites, there was like a live version of Google Earth, and you're like, well, are the Russian troops actually in the Ukraine right now? You could like pull up Google Maps and look. But I mean, then that's really up to whoever owns that distributive service, unless it's not owned by anybody if it's like a peer-to-peer protocol. You know, that's sort of, you can still spread disinformation, but there are ways you can make it harder to do that, I think. But that's sort of one of the points we brought up was about this utopian thinking, is that if everything's free and abundant, it means nobody will ever take advantage of other people, but I don't necessarily see that as being true either. So
yeah. See, and I think that conflict does drive these things. I mean, look how many innovations we had in airplanes just in World War II. But I don't like conflict on the planet. It'd be much cooler if, like, aliens or a sea monster started attacking Russia and we had to fly in and Europe had to help, and we started busting some monster's ass. Then we could kind of, sure, there's conflict, but we're hugging each other at the end. That would be a lot better than what's going on now.
Right. I'm pretty excited about that new Godzilla film.
Oh my god, I watched that trailer 5 times.
I still have my fan site from when I was 13 years old.
Alex, should we jump into the news?
Hold on,
the top 5?
I've got a bone to pick first.
Okay.
There's been a certain influx recently on the Our Futurology subreddit of a certain post, and it's a style of post called Science Summary of the Week. And I just want to say to whoever's making those, you're stepping on thin ice, buddy. Thin ice.
Yeah, you can go ahead and plug your. Alex has a show that he calls "Nobody's Paying Attention."
Nobody paying attention. Doesn't have an S in it.
Sorry.
I'm convinced there's a global conspiracy where nobody can say my show correctly except for me. So you're not alone in getting it wrong. Yeah, I do a show. It's meant to be monthly. I haven't done one in about 5 months, so maybe that's the reason why these have been popping up. I don't know, but it's over on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/SpeakMouthWords, which I'm just about to fill up with a bunch of different weird videos. I've got some strange ideas planned for my channel in the future, but there will be monthly updates on cool things that have happened that are kind of futuristic and technology wise.
Are you going to bring that feature back, because people like that feature?
Yeah.
I'm interested in these strange ideas.
Oh, and they're weird and artsy, and some of them don't have anything to do with futurology at all. So we'll see. I'm planning on making a video every day in April, which is a thing that some YouTubers do. So look forward to that. Should we move into the stories?
Awesome.
Sure. I'll start the first one. This had 1,806 upvotes submitted by AEO1003. The title is, "This woman invented a way to run 30 lab tests on only 1 drop of blood." And this is pretty huge. It's from Wired.com. And I just had my blood test done a few weeks ago, and they stick you, and then they throw like 5 different vials in there, and you have to fill them up, and it's not very fun. So hearing that you can do this with a pinprick right now, and the possibility that it could save, do you guys have the numbers offhand? How much money this could save? 98 billion could save 98 billion, and Medicaid 104 billion over the next decade. Wow.
What was the difference in blood? The volume of blood between like standard versus normal? I mean, there's like this image on here. A typical vial is like 3.9 inches, and then this vial is like only a half an inch. But I mean, what's the? I don't really know much about medicine or how do you say that? Phlebotomy? That's
Alex, help us.
I believe it's pronounced phlorecho. Yeah, phlebotomy, which is the science of looking at blood and seeing what's up with it. Yeah, it looks like, to me, that looks pretty much like, I don't know, like a milliliter, 2 milliliters of blood tops. Like, they call it 1 drop. I don't know how big a drop is, but how much did they take out of you when they were doing your blood test?
Quite a lot. I mean, the vials they use, they're, I don't know, 2-3 inches, and they fill those up, so
yeah,
quite a bit.
Yeah, that's quite a lot of difference. And if this uses less blood, is cheaper. I noticed in the article they mentioned that it uses less human contact, so maybe this is another piece of technology taking our jobs. And yeah, it seems pretty interesting and cool, this story. I noticed in the comments that some people were saying that like this has been done, or it's other companies have been doing this. So I don't know particularly. I mean, if that is true, I don't know particularly what's up with this story in particular. It seems like they recorded something at an event. Was that perhaps a Wired event, and they talked to her? Either way, I mean, it does seem like something out of science fiction, doesn't it? Just one tiny little drop, and you give it to them, and they can tell you everything you ever wanted to know about your blood.
Yeah, it's definitely got script potential. Her name is Elizabeth Holmes, by the way, and I believe she dropped out of college when she was 20, and used her. What was that?
She's like the Elon Musk of phlebotomy.
Yeah. So she used her tuition money to create this company called Theranos, and she's easy on the eyes as well. So we'll hit you with that story. Any other thoughts on it though?
Well, there actually was sort of a thread, or a lot of the comments in that in the comment thread were a bit sexist, and we had to do quite some heavy moderating, I think, on there too. Yeah,
from what I just said, and
yeah, it's
hey, you listen. It's not mean when you say someone is attractive. She's very smart, and I think she's she's creating something that we always see in sci-fi. You put your finger down, you get pricked, and it checks all the blood, and she's gonna hopefully save billions of dollars, and that's huge. But she's also very sexy. And don't say whatever people were saying, which was pretty. It's what trolls would say when they see a good-looking girl.
It was pretty horrendous, but it brings up this question that I've wondered about before too, which is I wonder how many futurologists are actually women, and if there isn't a large population of them, what would it take to get their input and have more involvement from them too? I mean, it might be just that Reddit has disproportionate representation by males, but I mean, what do you guys think?
I think there's definitely more males who are futurists, and just like I think there are. I mean, now there's especially in the last few years since the CSIs and stuff have been coming out, there's a lot more girls and females getting into that kind of stuff because it interests them. But I think there's a few prominent futurists that are females. Like there's Natasha Vita-Moore. There's what's her name, Rachel. What's her last name? Haywire or something? Do you know? Anyway,
that sounds familiar.
There's popular female futurists, but I would say there's definitely more men, because it's also very we get a lot of the sci-fi and cyberpunk crowd.
Yeah, it's quite engineering-y. It'd be interesting. We did a survey, right, about our demographics. It'd be interesting to normalize them against Reddit's demographics as a whole.
Mm.
What isn't surprising, though, is that if there is a prominent female scientist, that she's in biochemistry or biology. If you've been on campuses, you see biochemistry and biology are largely, over 50% female representation in that, like closing on 70-80%. It's quite interesting how that goes. Whereas like physics is mostly male, and I don't know what society is doing to push that in that way.
Yeah.
But
right.
Yeah.
Did you drop off you said you lagged and dropped off the call for a second, but did you hear me talk about CSI?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, because and I forget who was telling me that, but I guess it's pretty staggering because most people who watch those shows are women, and they always have that like the nerdy female with the lab coat, and if that's what it takes, then cool.
Yeah, representation's important.
And another thing about the I don't think it was that bad. People were saying some things, but thousands of people saw this article. It got almost 2,000 upvotes.
Right.
It got a handful of trolls. I don't think that represents the males of futurology.
I don't think once something
Right.
gets over 1,500, I don't think it represents futurology at all, because it starts hitting the front page of like Reddit itself. So
Yes.
we start to get Reddit as a whole. The people who go on are funny, and the people who go on I'm going to hell for this.
Yeah. Did you guys have anything to add, or do you want to go for the next story?
Do you want me to go through the next one?
Sure.
Yeah, let's move on.
Okay, so the next story is mind-controlled robotic suit exoskeleton will allow a paralyzed teen to kick off the first ball of this year's FIFA World Cup in Brazil. It has 1,447 upvoting points, and it was submitted by TrendSpotter. So this is a story through which I am quite familiar with the science. This is what I'm supposed to be trained in, cybernetics and bionics and stuff.
Oh,
Whether or not
interesting.
I feel I have the skills to do something like this is a different matter entirely. But this is an increasing trend that we're seeing in paralyzed people who suffer from paralysis, finding technological aids to help them start to walk again. And what's interesting about this one in particular is that it's straight from the brain to the device itself, to powering the assistants. In the past, we've seen robotic arms and things like that seem like they're being controlled by the mind, but in actuality, what we're doing is hooking up the input device, whatever it is they use, up to a muscle on the chest, and you're using your chest muscle to control your arm. This is different. I mean, what they're promising here is straight brain wire out into the legs, and what they're planning to do is having someone take the first kick of the ball at the 2014 World Cup, which is coming up soon. Should be this summer.
So firstly, as a Brit, you're probably more excited about football, as it were, than we are.
Yeah.
No, I'm still supportive of it. Seattle has a pretty thriving soccer scene, but so the way I understand that these direct nerve ending to electronic interfaces function is they use some sort of infrared device that touches on like fiber optics. Is that how this? At least that's how I've seen it before. Is that how this one operates?
I think what I've seen in the past is there was a guy called Kevin Warwick who I had the pleasure of being in his department when I was doing my masters, and what he did in the past, they had a chip which just had literally just metal spikes on it, the kind of thing you might see on a microchip or something like that, and they stuck it into a bundle of nerves, and what they do is they do some machine learning to work out which signals correspond to what they want to do. So if you can work out which combinations of nerve signals mean lift up your leg or move leg forward, then you can train a device to correspond accordingly with intention. And this is the kind of thing they trained on monkeys. Sorry, go ahead.
I have a question just on top of what you said. So they're putting these devices in the muscles and in the nerves they want to move, and there's a chip that is directly in the brain. Is that correct? And that chip then triggers those other devices that make the muscles move?
So what they're doing for this one, I might have talked about a slightly different system just now, but what they're doing for this one is they're putting a chip in the brain. This is exactly what they did with the monkeys, putting something in the brain, and they're working out the intention of the person, and they're seeing which signals occur on the chip when they have a particular intention. And then after a while, what they can do is, instead of asking the person what their intention is as they read the signal, they can straight up just read the signal, and then they know what the intention is, and they can send that intention down to the assistive device, which is like, I don't know, it looks like a kind of exoskeleton type thing, and then that intention corresponds to the correct movement of the legs. So it goes brain, wire, legs.
Brain, wire, legs.
And these are robotic legs, so it's not powering their actual muscles that they have, because those are either not there or degraded or whatever.
Oh, so it's for the exoskeleton.
Yes. So the brain tells the exoskeleton what to do via the chip.
So weren't they doing this before, but also directly moving the muscle?
I'm not sure. What you mean? You mean moving a muscle that they couldn't previously have moved due to some sort of signal failure in the spine or whatever?
Right. Like this is with an exoskeleton, but if you put an electrode in a muscle that's been paralyzed, it would still work. Or
well, I mean, it depends how degraded it's been, but that's probably one kind of angle of attack. You know, if you just got paralyzed a month or so ago, I'm sure your legs will be fine. I mean, I spend a lot of time lying down, and my legs haven't degraded just yet. So
right.
yeah, I'm sure that's one way of doing it, but potentially. But this way is the exoskeleton technique.
I feel like the typical method for prosthetics, at least for hands and such, that's been done in the past was you'd flex some part of your chest,
yeah, and
that would correspond to some motion of your hand or your thumb, or your on the prosthetic. This is doing direct inputs. Have you guys seen the Emotive headset before? Like those little EEG headsets?
Yeah.
Yes.
They're commercially available. I think it's almost the same principle, but trying to do pickup instead of direct induction on whatever nerve bundles. Instead, it was doing tried to do induction on those electrodes on your brain. I wonder how much. What is the difference in the which is the signal that much better when it's implanted versus picked up? I mean, I wonder what the signal to noise is between those two.
Well, it's absolutely much better when it's implanted. You know, with EEG, you're literally just picking up stray waves, and it's kind of around the whole brain, so it's a whole brain process, and it's just picking up things. I forget what it's sort of electromagnetic signals coming out, and so it can kind of tell large things. Like, so for example, that commercially available one is it controls like ears or whatever to make them wiggle. And there's certainly things you can do with advanced EEG stuff, but with this kind of thing, you can really pinpoint the right area in the brain, and you can really you can train it to do the right thing using machine learning, which is a lot better of a technique, I think.
It almost looks like this is surpassing like the stem cell stuff that you know, we've heard a lot of stuff about stem cells and not so much about this, but it looks like this is actually putting, you know, has the ability to put people back up on their feet, and stem cells are kind of where they have been for the last few years. Do you think that they'll still go kind of head to head?
Wasn't there an article in the last few years about, maybe it's the last year, about some sort of stem cell mixture where they regrew someone's finger, or was that a hoax? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't know either way.
There's a lot of stem cell stuff, but yeah, it's hard to find those anymore, because if you just do like a Google News and you search by week, there's always stuff coming out on stem cells, but it's like, do you know what I mean, Alex? It's a bunch of hypotheticals.
Yeah, so the stem cell approach would be regenerating the body, if anything.
Well, the nerves, right? The nerves that are hurt.
Yeah, what stem cells can, I mean, they're called stem cells because they can turn into any type of cell. So if you put them in amongst the nerves, they could potentially turn to nerve cells. I'm not super 100%, sure about stem cell type stuff, but it's interesting to see the different angle of attack you get, where you can either take the approach where you just attach machinery to the outside of you to fix your problem, or whether you can do things to actually fix the body itself rather than just circumventing it, like how they're doing in this story.
We'll have to find someone from Biochem to jump into one of these podcasts. So that thing I was thinking about was, I found an article from last June where they had some method of regrowing fingertips, but not an entire finger. So there's I think regenerative stem cell therapy is I think it's in its infant state. Well, it's probably not infant necessarily, but it's. I wonder if you were to plot it onto Moore's law, what stage we would be at. Maybe if we find some experts in the future, we can sort of compare this prosthetic. Maybe we could have a debate someday: prosthetics versus stem cell and regenerative science. Like which one is going to be ultimately be more effective at healing people? 20 years from now.
It's also hard to make those because I've seen a couple of those stories where people have regrown stuff. In fact, if you Google like regrown finger and then pig or something like that, do you remember that story? They used a part of a pig to help a guy regrow his finger. I also dated a girl who, when she was like 5, cut her finger off at the second knuckle, and they did some experimental thing that you can only do on kids, and her second half of the finger grew back, and you can tell that it's not like the other finger, like the knuckle is bigger, but just at first glance it looked like a regular finger.
Wow.
So, yeah, pretty weird. Did you guys want to add, or Tom, do you want to take us into story 3?
Yeah, so story 3 was about Michio Kaku's appearance on The Daily Show. I think it was February 25th that he came on. Did you record? Oh, that's the karma right there. It's 1255 Reddit karma, and it was submitted by the user Creative Embassy. Now, I have mixed feelings about Kaku. I respect him as, a prominent futurist, and he's done a lot to promote, STEM and science in general. However, I also feel like he sort of kind of steps out of his credentials sometimes, which is okay to do if you're writing, for the public. But I feel like sometimes he kind of masquerades as having this comprehensive research background in all these different fields. And, he's traditionally trained a physicist, and he's sort of going into like how the brain works in this book that he's promoting. And I think he echoes sort of the echelons of everything that Kurzweil talks about in terms of digital immortality and uploads and all that sort of stuff that futurology is crazy about. But if you talk to the outside world, they're going to look at you like you're a lunatic. But it was really interesting to see Jon Stewart's reaction to everything Michio Kaku was saying, because I think, because we sort of do have the echo chamber on our futurology, and it's not necessarily the same thing. We don't I think more and more people are starting to hear about these concepts of like the singularity and mind uploading and life extension, but not a lot of people take it very seriously, and so I think that was sort of like the evangelism that he was playing on going into this interview. I think it was also good that he talked, kind of extensively about Alzheimer's, because if you can sort of justify like a radical research change like this with an existing medical problem that is like really proliferate, then it gives you a lot more justification to keep pursuing that science, and not just for vanity reasons or that type of thing. It's less about greed, more about an equalizing force, which is it's something that I think that transhumanism, a lot of people look at it and sort of spin this story of like eugenics and elitism, but I think on the other hand, you can look at stuff like this and like those implants that go into people who have Parkinson's, and it's almost like this equalizing force. And I think if you could implant something in someone's brain that gave them better memory and sort of offloaded the load that your brain, your hippocampus, has to handle when you're trying to recall something, and that if that, like, my my grandma, who recently passed away, had Alzheimer's, and for pretty much the last 10 years, I couldn't even call her on the phone. It's like no one was there. It destroys families in a lot of ways. You have to, you got to take care of someone,
Right.
and like they're still alive, but you got to imagine how much suffering someone goes through if they have Alzheimer's.
Yeah, and Kaku talks about how Obama gives $1 billion to the Brain Project, where we're going to try to solve a lot of that stuff. And while we're solving this stuff, by the way, a comment by Funny Boy Jazz gives basically a recap of everything that Kaku said, and he did blow everybody's mind. He went into a lot of far future scenarios that you see often on the Science Channel, which I love to death, but some people might say we're circle jerking each other when we say we can. He gives one example, like, do you want to learn how to program? Well, you can just download that memory, and I would love that. I would love to be able to download stuff and not have to learn it. That would be awesome. But is that, Alex, you're more on the science end of it. Is that truly a reality, that we can download information just like apps and be able to, okay, look, I want to make a website. Let me download PHP, HTML, and maybe Java. Boom, done. Is that going to happen?
We are nowhere near to doing anything like that at the moment. We only just worked out how the brain hooks up to itself, so you'd have to do some extensive study on looking at the individual neural connections between the various neurons in people's brains, and trying to find some correlation between them knowing Java and people who don't know Java, for example. I mean, that's what you have to do. You have to rewire the brain, or you have to find out the signals that it gives to the right places in order to do something like this. And considering that we only just found out what's called the connectome of the brain within the last 5 years or so, absolutely nowhere near doing anything like that at the moment. But the way things go, really can't predict whether this kind of thing will be possible or not possible. We can do what we were talking about before, which is you take that step of thinking, well, if that could happen, what would need to happen in between for us to be able to do that? And there's going to have to be a lot to happen in between for us to be able to do that. But whether or not that's possible is not really for me to say.
Yeah. He also talks about how some people will get bonked on the head, and from then on will have a perfect memory. They'll be able to remember a page on a book from 5 years ago, exactly what word they read. And that is actually a disability after a while. People get anxiety and can't hold jobs and stuff. So if we do get these perfect memories, do we want perfect memory? I don't know if I do. What if you finally get that date with the girl of your dreams and she has bad breath? You don't want to remember that night. You know what I mean? I don't know if there should be selective memory, but I definitely want to be able to download knowledge or connect to the cloud for fast knowledge. God, that would be amazing.
Right. I think that condition you're talking about is called hyperthymesis. And there's actually a user, I'll decline from mentioning who, but they said that it's you remember all the traumatic stuff too. You sort of, including the injury itself. And so like you said, there's a lot of depression that sort of stems from that. I wonder if something along the lines of these hypothetical implants could help alleviate something like that too. And I wonder, I'm sort of the belief that we're going to build an AI before we understand how it works or understand how the brain works. I think we're going to have the chicken before the egg, essentially. And just because I think we're going to, I think as we sort of create these learning algorithms, as machine learning advances, I think there's sort of going to be more resource dumped into that because there's more economic incentive for companies to go into artificial intelligence than it is necessarily to have trained physicians and physicists go into like all the different ion channels of the brain and, you know, reverse engineer it. I think we're going to come up with an AI that will be able to do the sort of things you're talking about, like learning PHP and HTML, and it'll be able to. So that'll be around a lot earlier than will be like to download a memory. You'll be able to have sort of like this AI that really knows you better, like in a creepy way, like more than like one of your closest friends, or maybe even better than you know yourself.
I would like that.
And it'll probably be able to help you learn things faster, but it'll also probably be able to, if code, you know, maybe we'll have code generators that can, or, you know, just like a huge library of templates and things. So it'll kind of compile things together for you.
I want that too. I want that. In fact, I think I want what you just said even more than the other thing, because I would like, if it's a situation where it's that movie, like that movie Her. I haven't seen it, but let's just say you have a voice talking to you all day, and I would tell it, hey, I haven't done my taxes yet. Can you jump on TurboTax and do all this? Give me maximum refund. You know, like, I want you to scour every employment site and find me like a really good job in video games. Like, you know what? Send out 300 resumes. That's what would be cool for having an AI assistant.
What's the name of the AI assistant in Iron Man? Is it Jarvis?
Jarvis.
Yeah. That's the
I would
ideal.
love Jarvis. I would love a Jarvis.
Yeah, I'm waiting for, because I mean, you go on things like Cleverbot and all these like AI things, and it's a bit kind of janky at the moment. But to get to the point where you can just chat with an AI, you know, I think how good that would be for people that are living alone, especially the elderly, for example. I mean, they used to get cats in the past. If you're old and that's who you talk to, you talk to your cat. But imagine having an AI companion when you're 80 years old and
I would like that
away.
Now.
Yeah.
Jarvis teaches typing, right?
Yeah.
That was a thing.
So, Alex, do you think we're going to get the AI through reverse engineering a brain first, or do you think we're going to find it just by hard coding?
I think we're probably going to hard code things that are similar to brains. It's going to be a kind of fusion between the two. Definitely the AI that can do stuff for you, I imagine, would happen before the being able to download the being able to do stuff into your brain. Definitely, I agree with that.
Yeah, in fact, I think our brain, like, it doesn't make sense, but I think our brain is just like a computer AI. It's just a bunch of algorithms. If you think about it, what kind of mood you're in, well, if you balance, think of your brain as a bunch of if statements. Well, right now I have, this much water in me, this much vitamin C. What kind of a reaction am I going to have if I wake up on this side of the bed and this, you know what I mean? Yeah. I'm sure it's a ton of algorithms in there.
Yeah, I mean it's not discrete. Like it's not if then. Like it's a weird kind of thing. But yeah, definitely it can be approached numerically. I mean,
yeah.
But
are you guys familiar with Entropica?
Kind of.
So they're I forget. I think it was Dr. Alexander Wisner Gross. That's what it says on the website. His premise is that he's working on an artificial intelligence that is derived from thermodynamic principles, and he thinks that it's sort of like a self-adjusting automata state machine type thing where it's trying to allocate the maximum number of possible futures is in his terms, and that's sort of what I think we're going to see something interesting in terms of taking different chunks of AI projects, sort of like this one is like almost like I don't know if it's Bayesian in nature, but it's sort of like a weighting algorithm where it's trying to find, maxima and minima, versus something like Watson, which is like a really awesome search algorithm. And then there's other things like semantic technologies, which will be really good at translating between different languages or between abstract concepts and spoken written language. So I think that the first AIs we're going to have will kind of be an amalgamation of all these different things, and they're going to be massively parallelized, but they'll sort of, again, to reach back into Kaku's talk, I think we'll probably have AI quite a ways before we have brain interfacing pretty comprehensively.
With regards to that modular idea with AI, think about it this way: there's a reason that our brain is largely departmentalized. Some sections for doing motor stuff, some sections for doing language stuff. I mean, it's not completely sectioned off. I mean, you do some bits here and there, but the fact that our brain, which is almost provably the best computer that we've ever found, has different sections for doing different things, just kind of proves that maybe that'll be the right approach to doing AI, is you have one program that can do language and one program that can do abstract reasoning and stuff like that. So
I'm surprised no one has done like recorded all the data from Chat Roulette or what's the other one, Omega. If you had some type of deep learning that just recorded everyone's interaction, and because I go on Cleverbot and sometimes it makes no sense, other times it's almost a conversation, but if it was just learning how other people interact, I think it would, you know what I mean, like use that as actual information, try to crowdsource the humanness into the AI. So you guys want to move on?
Yeah, we could talk about this stuff all day.
So this one didn't make the list, but we're going to talk about it because it was a self-post that says the Liberal Party of Canada just voted to adopt basic income as a policy in next year's election. And we wanted to bring this up because there's a lot of UBI talk, and they even have their own subreddit now, and some people get really mad when people submit the universal basic income post, and some people are very religious about it, think it's the best thing. Right now, I think this podcast, I think we're kind of indifferent. I think it would be cool, but I still don't know enough about it. So if there's somebody who wants to debate the cons or debate against universal basic income, please get in touch with us. Leave me a message on Reddit, or Alex or Tom. And if you want to be the guy who is pro universal basic income, please let us know as well. And we don't want to have a big flame war, but it would just be good to have, give two people a platform to talk on about the issue.
In the meantime,
I feel like
sorry, go ahead.
I feel like maybe the biggest contention is that it gets brought up a lot. I think it's because it's an easy topic to debate. It's not super technical in nature, and as we sort of look at basic income, we also look at sort of like this growing job automation as a very common theme, and so we sort of see these two problems as converging. And I think that's where a lot of the contention might come into, is we sort of fear for this like future date where there's like some time, there's like a like a ticking clock for how long we have to figure out how to run the next economy.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be interesting to have a debate from both sides. I think it'll be good to frame it against maybe a month or so from now, because Iceland is working on coming up with they're going to release, there's something called Aurora Coin. It's already been released and it's being valued. It's at a pretty high market cap already, but it's going to be released. I think 30,000 unique coins are going to be distributed to every single every single citizen of Iceland based on some I don't know, if it's something equivalent to a social security number.
Wow.
So there's going to be a lot of good context for having this discussion about a month from now. I also think one of the big thing that gets overlooked when this debate comes up is, what is the design of the currency itself that's being distributed to? I've always been of the premise that maybe we should look into how money is generated or how it is secured. And that's a big thing that the cryptocurrency community might they have a lot of different feelings about the same thing too. So yeah, let's maybe at the end of this we can do another roll call. But yeah, I hope we find some good debaters.
In the meantime, though, with regards to posts about UBI on the subreddit, I have like a couple things to say. Firstly, the debate's often not technical. It absolutely should be technical. Economics is a technical subject, and a lot of people like to weigh in with just no idea at all. And I'm guilty of doing that for all sorts of other topics. But can I just hypocritically say that can we please try and keep UBI technical rather than just the I'd like to work on this project or that project, and wouldn't this be great if? I mean, it is definitely a technical quantitative issue, and a lot of people
so if you're an economist, say so, that way we can upvote you.
Yeah,
more.
Please. And another thing I have to say on the topic is if you're submitting stuff, this isn't like an official mod position, but like as a mod, I feel like I get a little bit of an opinion on this. If you're submitting UBI things, please try and keep them on topic, connected to technological unemployment, rather than just random news about UBI. If you want random news about UBI, there is a subreddit for that, and I know we're like nice about it on Futurology, but I'd kind of prefer if it was framed in a futurologist kind of way. I know that doesn't happen. This is wishful thinking on my part, but that's just how I kind of wish it would be.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems like when a very passionate conservative starts pulling data or whatever, then I'm like, I don't think it'll work. And then someone passionate on the other side gets me thinking I really want a UBI, and I don't know. I think it could work, but again, I don't know much about economics, and again, the United States is much different than Iceland. So
absolutely. Yeah. So that was meant to be a topic that we weren't going to talk about. So can we move on to one that we were intending to talk about?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a post by Bob Toenail. It got 1,143 upvotes, and it is entitled Power Generating Nanoribbons Implanted on the Heart. Now, this is a rarity on our podcast, for we do not normally talk about posts that are just images. This is just a GIF image. But it's quite interesting, and it's a demonstration of some aspect of technology that we haven't talked about before, so we decided to include it.
We have a very medical theme this time around, it seems like.
Yeah.
I think there were a couple articles that were linked into some of the comments, though. And there's also a few similar stories have been released recently about 3D printed like custom heart wraps, and just like the heart seems to be like kind of there seems to be a lot of work going on right now with new technologies being applied to how the heart functions. I know, like, I think it was about a year ago, some group came out with like a heart that doesn't actually pump, but it had like motors in it that turned a turbine, and like little fans would go, so the guy didn't actually have a pulse. I know there's also, like, they're talking about regrowing hearts and other organs from a patient's own stem cells, which sort of alludes to that debate we were kind of having earlier, which is augmentation or regeneration going to be more helpful in shaping the field of advanced medicine? But I mean, what exactly I think this chip that gets implanted onto the heart would sort of function in the same way that Alex, do you know what that is called when kinetic motion creates energy for electronics to run?
Yeah. It's. I mean, I don't know the specifics on this one, but if you were to tell me that there was some ribbon that generated energy based on movement, I would say it's probably done with piezoelectric crystals, which are a system, a crystal that when it's bent out of shape, it generates a voltage. and a
it's
voltage
all flashing back.
is just a potential energy around a circuit. So if you set up a voltage, it means you're going to get energy out of it. And what was happening on this apparently was that the ribbons were powering the pacemaker. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe that was the case.
Which is smart. It's definitely a good way of going out powering a pacemaker, because you have some people on pacemakers and the pacemaker's actually just keeping their heart going, and they're connected to a battery pack. And what's scary about it is that they have this wire connected to a battery pack that, if they were to go past a wayward branch, could pull out, and they'd have 2 minutes to live before they put it back in. It's quite concerning, and it's also quite you can get quite existential about this kind of thing. If you have that type of the heart implant that we were talking about before, with just a motor that keeps it going round, if the battery on that runs out, or if you have a wire sticking into it that powers it, you have this thing that you could pull out and end your life at any time. You know, it's always just there beckoning you. Could you possibly imagine how that?
It's like Iron Man 1.
It is, yeah. If his heart goes off, then Jarvis is going to say, "Uh-oh, you got a problem."
Is this happening now on a human heart? I've just been staring at the GIF the entire time. Is this in someone's actual heart? Is this something that can happen now, or is this something that they're still doing trials on? Anybody?
I don't know.
There's no actual article, so.
Well, it's probably not FDA approved yet, but
yeah. And that's I think the biggest bummer about Futurology is, but we always post these incredible medical articles, and the reality is the FDA sucks really bad. And I don't know if waiting so long for stuff is a good thing, if it's just big pharma trying to cover their ass. But I had to get or I have to get surgery coming up to do some vertebrae work, and I was telling the doctor, I was like, yeah, 3D print some new vertebrae and throw them in there. Why can't this happen? And they were looking at me like I'm an alien. Like, no, that can't work. We have to use these archaic screws and bolts. And I was like, wow, maybe I am a little too optimistic in this subreddit. I see these amazing exoskeletons and 3D printed hearts, and then a doctor in Southern California is still using, surgeries that they were using from 20 years ago. When do you think we'll actually see some of this nanotech and 3D printed organs get FDA approval?
What's that quote? The future already exists, but it's not evenly distributed yet.
Mm.
I mean, I think the adoption time for medicine is it's really slow in the United States, just because, I think there's a lot of moneyed interest at stake. I mean, you can't even buy certain things online anymore. Like you can't buy like dental equipment. Like I forget what the name of the position is, but there's every hospital has someone who does all the buying and selling and price setting of all the procedures, and they sort of have to keep things artificially inflated so that they can pay all the contingent staff that's working there and all the nurses and everything. So it's sort of the more costly procedures that rely on older technologies, it's sort of more economical, I think. I mean, I don't know. And the other thing is, I think you have to lobby for new procedures, because like I think maybe there's some disconnect between pharmaceutical and then like restorative medicine, where you actually have to use bits and pieces of stuff. But again, I think maybe we should find somebody who's worked in the industry for a while. We should have another medically themed podcast where we get someone maybe from Ask Science or like our biology or something to come.
Yeah, well even Alex is just, I mean, in the UK, you guys have completely different laws too, right? Like some stuff is legal over there that isn't over here, and vice versa, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's weird. If you ever looked at our Nootropics, the subreddit for chemicals that you ingest that can change your brain function in a positive manner. If you ever look at that, they have like big tables about what's legal where, and whether you get some drugs over the counter and whether you can't, and there's this huge disconnect everywhere. And it seems that like a lot of places have a system like this. What's interesting about the FDA, and I'm sure we have an equivalent in the UK, is that it seems to be with a lot of these medical procedures you have a banned until proven safe and then it's legal, rather than a legal until proven unsafe and then it's banned. And it's interesting. I mean, obviously there's safety concerns about this and that, and maybe you can have some sort of combination of both of those, but it seems that banned until proven safe and then it's legal is not the best way to go about like fast advance, but maybe it's a safer way, and it's a matter of priorities. I mean, you don't want to endanger people's lives. I mean, it's the last thing you want to do.
Yeah. Should we move on to the last story?
Let's. Do you want me to do it?
Yes.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Okay, this one was submitted by Sim Curious. I don't know if that's short for Simon and then Curious, or just Sim Curious, curious about Sims. Either way, it has 951 upvotes at the moment, and it's entitled "Clerics Issue Fatwa: Muslims Can't Live on Mars." And this was a story saying that some clerics in was it Saudi Arabia? Was it have said that Muslims are ill-advised to travel to Mars because it would be against the teachings on suicide in the Quran, according to this particular story. Now, I know, Tom, you were looking into this and you found that the actual story was somewhat different.
Yeah, so I read into a couple of related posts or related websites that also had a discussion about this same fatwa, and it seemed like the initial statement was that Muslims are not allowed to participate on the Mars One journey to Mars,
Right.
and as far as I understand it, a fatwa isn't necessarily law. It's a cleric's interpretation of the law. It would be like the same thing in Catholicism if not the Pope himself, but I think like maybe some archbishop issued some statement that, you know, Catholics shouldn't eat space ice cream or something like that. Yeah. This is kind of like the equivalent, because they think that the Mars One mission is pretty much a one-way ticket to your own death, and they deem it as a type of suicide. I don't think they're necessarily against Muslims living in space or going to other planets in general. It was just this one case of a cleric being like trying to be protective of Muslims because they think that Mars One is super dangerous. I think most of us, you know, we're a little on the fence of whether we even believe Mars One is going to happen in the first place.
Yeah. Well, Mike, I don't know much about religion. I'll tell you that right now, but isn't the Muslim religion, and I'm sorry if I'm saying this in an offensive way, but isn't that the one where you can get 72 virgins if you die in the name of your religion or something?
Well, I think the statement with this article was that you shouldn't die for no reason at all, or for a non-religious reason. And so it's not, he thinks, you know, going to Mars to, you know, try and live for a little while and then dying is not a good use of one's life. And it's
well, you could flip that and say they're bringing their religion to another planet, but
first missionary to Mars.
Missionary to Mars.
I don't feel that any of us are particularly well informed enough to talk about the the ins and outs of Islam, but I do feel that this is kind of indicative of of an interesting conversation that could be had about the cross section between advancing technology and transhumanism and religion in general. I mean, where the cross section happens, it's quite interesting. So bringing up perhaps Judaism, you know, not being able to eat pork. Well, you know, what about a artificially grown pork? Does that count? You know, does pork grown in the lab still have the 10,000 demons of Legion inside of it, or is it not? Does it have to be bred normally? Does it have to be a pig in order for it to be incorrect? Because the treating of meats with kosher is it's cloven hooved animals you're not allowed to eat, and if they never had a hoof in the first place, you know, what happens there? There's a lot to be discussed by various religions and all their various rules on interesting things that are going to happen technology wise.
Right.
I would love to see the data on percentage of people who are religious year to year, because I heard there's like a staggering amount of people who leave their religion every year. And of course this is going to make headlines for a while, but eventually I think this is just going to fizzle out and be a few extremists and everyone else is, you know, just like there's a flat earth society still. No one pays attention. But
well, I mean, there's also the other flip side of the coin too, which is a lot of futurists and people who frequent our subreddit also sort of view transhumanism as sort of this rapture of the nerds. It's almost as if the singularity itself is something they don't only want it to happen, but they kind of expect it and sort of in their own way pray for it to happen, and they're sort of maybe evangelizing the concept for the wrong reasons. But I also feel like there's a big backlash against people who act that way too, and definitely there's huge connotations for, you know, the intersection of religion, which is immortal life, which is, I don't, you know, in religion is typically life after death. This is, you just do not experience death in transhumanism. There's what other parallels are there? I mean, that you can heal the sick. You know, there's a lot of different elements that you could interpret in the wrong way, in a non-scientific way. And just like you said, there's so many caveats in existing religions that are going to be overturned or questioned deeply by these new things that happen in technology. And I think the key among them is sort of like Michio Kaku brings up in his, you know, mapping of the brain, is if you start to upload your mind into a new substrate, does your soul still exist there? That was sort of, Jon Stewart sort of had a little flip out about that on the show. So there's definitely going to be a broad popular, and I'm not talking popular on futurology, but the general populace is going to have a lot of deep sentiments about, you know, what it means to be a person, and that'll be just as big as the interpretation of all these little knickknacks and rules too, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there should be, starting now, there should be discussion on this. There should be think tanks and foundations thinking about the what's classed as a person and what isn't. You know, things like AI rights. There's a lot of discussion that's going to happen in the next few years, as there always is. But at the moment, we've been kind of plugging away at things that could have been discussed in the 17th century. I mean, things are mostly just moving along. I mean, what's the most recent, like, massive discussion that couldn't have been had 200 years ago? Perhaps the use of nuclear weapons, and that's about it. The use of chemical weapons. That's it. That's the only new thing. And we're cruising along. We're spiraling towards a world in which there's going to be about 6 or 7 new discussions appearing, whereas we've just been having new discussions on a drip recently.
Right. Well, you say that now because we're living in the time, but if you took someone from the 1700s and you put him in now, he would look at the sky and shit his pants when he'd see, you know, helicopters, airplanes flying around, the internet, cell phones. So much stuff has come, and it looks like something very small compared to the atomic bomb. But I think the internet was a bigger find than the atomic bomb was.
But I mean, like, the kind of ethical discussion that emerges around it. I mean, was there a huge ethical discussion about the internet? Maybe there was a little bit, but perhaps there wasn't an enormous discussion that led to the term mutually assured destruction and things like that.
There are a lot of ethical considerations recently with a pervasive surveillance state and the sort of like censorship going on. All these different countries are starting to cordon off their section of the internet in hopes of increasing security. I've always wondered or thought it would make like a good like sci-fi novel if maybe the internet was a living AI in of itself. It experienced the universe in some way, and as surveillance and like censorship takes place, like it's slowly like killing the, it's like doing brain damage to this like creature that we don't really know about. And I've always sort of like this weird meta cyberpunk idea where our network is actually like the backbone of it's the brain of humanity itself, and we're like hitting it in the head and like something damaging it in ways we can't even comprehend.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the more I see this discussion, the more I'm starting to go to the right, and I've recently told my complex they should install security cameras because we have people who they just trash everything. They tagged a wall the other day with spray paint, and the complex is pretty nice. So it would. I like security for those reasons. I don't want to be spied on, but I also want to know who can be held accountable for ruining a piece of property. And still, I'm kind of baffled when crimes happen, and usually, more often than not, it's like you can't get away with a big crime anymore without getting caught. But still, you can get away. And do we want to make that step into having eyes on everything, or not? I don't know. I'm still on the fence a little bit.
Yeah. But
yeah, it's definitely an ethical discussion. But Alex, I see your point as well. How nothing's been as big as the atomic bomb discussion.
Well, I mean, for example, the this surveillance thing, this all-pervasive surveillance discussion that we've been having now, is probably the first in the long line of new modern ethical discussions that's going to emerge about various things. Perhaps there have been some small discussions on things like IVF treatment and things like that, but I mean the NSA business and the and don't let me just say NSA, because I mean all the countries are doing it, but all of this stuff is really just grabbed everyone's attention, and it seems that most internet savvy people and a good chunk of the population at large are thinking about this now, and it's interesting how it's taken hold like that.
Well, and I don't know if this is really an ethical discussion, but all the stuff that just happened with Bitcoin, like hackers took what was it, millions or hundreds of millions worth of dollars in Bitcoins? Or no, it wasn't that high, but it was pretty high, wasn't it?
From Mount Gox, or
yeah.
Well, we still don't know whether that was malicious or not, or whether that was just the owners just sneaking it away and saying, "Oops, we lost it." So I wouldn't. Right. That's still an open book.
That's kind of an ethical discussion. One, like, if that was their fault and it comes out, they're probably going to have a price on their head. And two, if it wasn't their fault, then that's a pretty dick move to steal millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And get someone possibly killed. Could you imagine losing like $1 million worth of some Russian mobster's Bitcoin?
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, and you don't want to annoy the Bitcoin people, because that's how you pay for getting hits on people's heads, is in Bitcoin in the deep web. So
right.
Yeah.
Anyway,
are we done?
I think that was the last story, unless you guys want to add anything.
No, I mean, I think, I do agree that there are going to be a lot of those ethical discussions coming up. I think maybe for future podcasts we could see what types of discussion. Maybe we could start a common, like maybe a weekly or monthly thread about like having people bring up ethical debates or ethical considerations, maybe in a self-post, and try to see what people think is going to be like the biggest. What are people's guesses of what the biggest ethical issues are going to be in the next 5 to 10 years? And that,
we could totally do that.
And that
Alex, if people want to follow you and want to check out your channel, where can they do that?
They can do that at youtube.com/SpeakMouthWords. That's all one word, SpeakMouthWords. I always encourage people to come along and engage me on Twitter and stuff as well, because I'm hooked to my tablet at the moment. So the moment I get anything through, I'm going to be responding. So that's also twitter.com/SpeakMouthWords.
Tom, how can people get a hold of you?
I run a blog at www.iontom, that is IONTOM.com. Haven't updated it in a while, but I'm probably going to do a revamp of it soon. And if you live in the Seattle area, I advise you to come meet up with me and my friends at we're at the Seattle Futurist Society. You can find us. We have Seattle Futurists with an S .org, and you can look us up on meetup.com. Seattle Futurist Society. Just look us up, and hopefully we'll have another outing soon, and we'd love to see you out there.
Awesome. And I'm on Reddit as Blinker Goes Left, so if you want to send me a message and do the debate about the UBI, possibly next month, depending on if we have people to do it, then let me know. Also, Twitter is @regretful. And that's about it. I will see you guys next month.
Which leads to an obvious conclusion. We are the gods now.